almost believed myself deserving of love, till come the morning I forgot. My heart tenderized with grief, discovering the night my mother died. Love is an ether you can choke or float in.
You're watching Home Stages Meet the Poet, where today we're joined by award-winning poet Pratibha Castle. Pratibha is a retired singer and holistic therapist, and as a child she was always a keen writer, but ended up taking a break from her passion for a fairly long time. She's now been called back to writing, returning to her lifelong dream, and is here to show you all that it's never too late for you to do the same. Pratibha eventually went to university and completed an undergraduate degree in English and creative writing at the age of 61, and then followed it on with a master's in creative writing. Since then, her poetry has been published in various journals, magazines, and anthologies, and shortlisted in several competitions. Pratibha's award-winning debut pamphlet is called A Triptych of Birds and a Few Loose Feathers, which is being published by Hedgehog Press later this year. She's here to tell you more about the influences behind it and the healing function that writing her pamphlet has provided. Let's speak to Pratibha. So, hi Pratibha, it's lovely to have you here.
Hi, Florrie. It's great to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming along. So, a question that I wanted to start off with before we launch into hearing your poetry is I wanted to get an idea of what your writing process is like. It's something that I'm always interested to hear about from our guests. So, do you have a set writing process? Are you a quick writer or, a forever editor? What's your way of going about writing your poems?
Okay. Well, poems usually most of my poems start from an image. And out of that image, then more images come. I start with images, rather more than ideas of what the poem's going to be about. And somehow they just sprout. And I
Yeah.
suddenly find that there's something, which I hadn't imagined or considered. But I'm very imagistic, very image inspired. And the image can come from being on a walk in nature or from some poet that I'm reading, and something in the poem or some image in the poem just kind of kicks something off in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes a poem will come almost like, fully fledged. I believe they're called a donne.
Mm.
Really is like something is given, and I'm just the vehicle, the conduit for it. And I also can spend ages picking, editing,
Yeah.
which is part of the joy, to kind of try and fine tune something so that it absolutely chimes inside of you. Is
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you ever find, you edit a little bit too much and then you're sort of like, where did this poem even begin? Do you ever lose the essence of it?
Well, I think what happens if it starts to feel jaded or it's like I'm picking at it too much, I just put it away. I just
Yeah.
forget about it.
Mm.
And then maybe, like, there have been some poems that I've done that with, and I've come back to them, a year or
Mm.
two on. And with that distance, it's clear, it becomes clear where to go or how to
Yeah.
be with it. Other
Mhm.
times, with other poems, it can be a few days or a week or two, the
Mm.
space needed to kind of see them with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's very different poems, different times.
Hmm. And so it sounds like you were a fairly keen writer as a child, but you did take this break before deciding to actually pursue writing in English at university. Was there a reason why you had this break throughout a lot of your adulthood?
I think so. Firstly, I was always involved with some kind of creative endeavor. I played the piano, I danced, I sang. I sang for quite a number of years into my as an adult. But something happened when I was about 9 or 10. My parents worked as live-in staff, as cook and butler, and there was an essay we had to write at school about my home, entitled My Home. So I, this innocent kid, I wrote this essay, which I was really proud about,
Yeah.
talking about the life I lived. And I gave it to my father, expecting him to congratulate me on a really great essay. And he made me tear the pages out and ink through the first paragraph, which came at the end of the previous week's essay, so that nothing could be read. And gosh, even as I talk about it now, I feel the sort of how strong a disturbance that was. And I think that really affected my sense of confidence because, of course, at that age, I didn't understand what was going on, that
Yeah.
he felt ashamed of and didn't. And particularly in those days, things were very different
Mm,
back in the 50s. So I
yeah.
think that really affected me. I carried on. I was a holistic therapist and I ran holistic therapy workshops, and I wrote blurbs for those, and I wrote one or two articles about holistic therapy. So there was always this kind of urge to write. But it
Yeah.
was when my mother died, I suddenly realized, I wasn't going to be around forever and I'd better get on and live those dreams that I hadn't lived. And that's when I
Mm.
went to university.
I'm glad you did because you've produced an excellent pamphlet of poems that you'll be reading for us. And I mean, yeah, we'll probably head over soon to your first reading. But before we do, so your pamphlet is A Triptych of Birds and a Few Loose Feathers. And I just wondered if you could tell our audience a little bit about the focus of this book before we hear you read from it.
Right. Okay, well, it has a few themes that run through it. I mean, one definitely is the natural world. As a child, the natural world was my kind of savior in many ways. Um, these big houses we lived in, they had vast gardens and grounds. And so I spent my days roaming around and appreciating and loving the nature I found myself in. And the other aspect is a kind of reclaiming of my Irish heritage. I was born in Ireland, all my family is Irish, but we moved over in 1953 to London. Um, and my mother sent me when I was older, my mother sent me to elocution classes so that I wouldn't sound Irish, so I'd kind of fit in, because at that time there was a lot of prejudice against the Irish. It changes the particular people that are being prejudiced against. It changes from decade to decade. So there's a kind of reclaiming of that identity. And there's also a very strong element of healing in relation to my mother, um, which only really came about when I came to understand things after she died. I came to understand uh, my yeah. I just understood a lot, and it's come out in the poems, in the
Yeah.
writing.
Well, I think I'll hand over to you for your first reading then.
Okay, the first couple of poems are involved with nature, are focusing really on nature, and also a little hint of the Irish tradition. So the first one is called A Celtic Spell. It's inspired by something that happened earlier this year. He kept watch outside the back door. From a skeleton forsythia, choked past hope by an alpha jasmine, buffed his beak on a knuckly twig, flounced his tail, bounced down onto the terrace for a wary recce. Gran told tales of Celtic lore, of a blackbird's luck, how they augured weather, death. In a clutch of days, he wheedled a cranny in my heart. His mystic whistles wooed me, swelled my chest with an ache to shout out secrets. When I hipped a basket to the carousel, he flustered back into the bush. I pegged out socks, a tea towel, baby vest. His onyx eyes, cold in gold, reminded me of you. Discovering his taste for mealy worms, I bought a tub, ripped off cardboard, bubble wrap, prized open the lid, scattered desiccated corpses. He scrutinized my every move, his tail flick the black fan flirt of a senorita. He fluttered to the worms, bobbed his head from side to side as if negotiating traffic, gobbled. A sparrow came. The blackbird chased him off. The sparrow's hen risked a peck and scarpered. So did a wren. He greets me now with a chuckle and a whir of wings. When I dribble out his feast, he quivers on a flower pot, trumpets a salute, swoops in to dine. The forsythia is showing root. I miss the wren. Sparrow love. The female flirts her tail, flamenco flounce of a doyenne cute at charm. Thumbs up for the male, a coy first timer by the looks of his several efforts till the deed is done. When she whisks into the nest to sort, I presume, the housekeeping, he is quick to follow. Now he's got the hang of things, no doubt eager to improve. A flutter till he arrows from beneath the eaves to return in a tail's flicker to the drain, where he struts, the bon mot of a small white feather in his beak, proof to the beloved how fine a catch he is. As I dream of its kiss against my cheek, the cot this snowy boon will fashion for its prize of eggs, brown speckle glazed with the suspicion of a sheen, an image drowns my heart. My father, his eyes behind black-rimmed glasses, shiny with incipient grief. Tears I caught the hint of once, the day my mother bundled me into a taxi, scrambled after. Not a mention of it ever in the access hours I idled with him at the flicks, over milkshakes in the Wimpy bar, doughnuts, ice cream cones. Apart from that last day in St. Michael's Hospital. 2 weeks and not a word. His eyes opened. Ron, I've missed you. An ocean streaming down his cheeks. The other theme that is in the pamphlet and that I'm actually writing more about now in my next pamphlet or collection is the 60s, my experience of the 60s. So the next couple of poems reflect this reality. Hippie Chick Blues. We collide at a pumpkin stall down Portobello Market. You assess the silver blue luster of a crown prince. I caress the green mottle of kombucha. Its skin craggy as an old crone's hopes or rocky crevices about Olympus. Yellow peel Turks' turbans glower in a pile. We twirl, we swirl beneath a hunter moon into a dew-glazed gloam, tranced by the keen of a penny whistle, banshee yowl of a turf fire fiddle. Mammy cautions, don't you flaunt your heart upon your sleeve. So I sit till after midnight, stricken by her third degree and first love's fluster, embroider right across my tit, which you and later I will feel, a plump crimson pumper, brethren to the thorn-snarled muscle of the plaster Christ enshrined beside the sapphire Mary on the parlour mantel. You wild-eyed Ulysses, the twang of your finger-licking Gibson plucks from me a young girl's fancy, as the plight of your jeans, frayed as nerves, suggests a stitch-up. I oblige with bird-track tack of rainbow hues, infused with moon-hex fantasies, and a couch-stitch pumpkin to curse your knee. Next one is called The Only One Who Loves You. Spurning words that echoed like a curse, I stuffed a duffel bag with blister packs of pills, Mary Quant Minis, fantasies of girls, threading daisies in the muzzles of guns, escaped to the big smoke. In a bedsit by Kensington Gardens, I massacred steak with a mallet of hate. A year on turned vegan, pioneer in '68 of pity for pool-eyed cows, sheep, slate stare, place, feigned compassion. Strove to prove to myself that I was worthy of love. Strutted the nights away with flautists, a harpist whose healer's hands strummed my strings, drummer, his silk-tipped stroke nimble on the snare. Callous guitarists plucking tunes from smoke drifts. Chanted mantras with Ram Dass in a basement in Notting Hill. Dossed in a Maida Vale squat. Candles, Calor gas stove, the one tap, drip, drip, in the bog beside the back door. Made out off my head with a sweetheart leaf philodendron. Burnt joss sticks to placate Kali's hoard of swords, sweeten the vibes, man, stench of cat-lit no one from the Highgate commune I crashed in next, ever emptied. Spooned marmalade from a jar half full, recycled from a skip. Almost believed myself deserving of love, till come the morning I forgot. My heart tenderized with grief, discovering the night my mother died. Love is an ether you can choke or float in. This is A Walk on the South Downs. Wolf sense idles me into a random field where sheep take a brief break from munching grass to glance my way. A black-faced dam fixes me with Satan gaze, transmits a cipher I likely misconstrue, watches as I mount the stile, swing my leg across as if the worn wood is the saddle of an imaginary mare, set to canter me off into a fey-mist distance. Beyond the field, a path through the woods, petals open into a copse, incense of wild thyme, garlic blooming beneath my feet. Blousy clematis tosses into a breeze, wafting the fantasy of a cuckoo. Dryads lean in, anoint me with murmured prayers. I drift in wonder at a feather amongst the leaves from the red kite keening in the blue, flash above the brook of turquoise, shadow splash of heron.
Beautiful. Thank you, Pratibha. That was a
Thank
wonderful first
you.
reading.
Mm.
So I have a question, which is some of the poems are quite brazen, like with hippie chick blues. You're very like open and honest, and I wondered if you ever get scared about that honesty of poetry, or if you're really quite happy to just lay everything out on the page and be very open.
Well, when I'm writing, there's no thought of anything else other than, the music and yeah. And then sometimes afterwards, there's a few poems. There's one I'm thinking of that I haven't read today. And, I was brought up as a Catholic. And um, some of my writing is quite strong in relation to that subject. And I wonder sometimes, just how okay it is, or if it's going to be disturbing for people. But I didn't when I'm writing. It's like there's no thought of that. It's only in hindsight. Um, but also, yeah, I think some of my strongest poems are the ones that really just let it all come out. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's just between you and the poem, you and the page, not thinking about the audience as such.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and then
And
also, I wondered. Oh, sorry, no, you go on.
I was going to say, inevitably, there'll be people for whom your work resonates, and other people for whom it won't be so resonant. And you have to read what or listen to what appeals to you or resonates for you, and just let go what doesn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry. Yeah.
I was going to ask, um, with the title of the book, A Triptych of Birds and a Few Loose Feathers, why this idea of a triptych? Was there a reason behind that idea?
I only thought of the reason after the name had come, because it came through. It was one of those things. It came and it was really solid. That's what it is. That's what the title is.
Yeah.
And somehow it's to do with me and my parents and the interaction. My mother left my father when I was 10, and I don't know, that was, and maybe also, in the Catholic religion there's the Trinity, so maybe that as well somehow unconsciously worked on
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, there's we hear more about this idea of Catholicism in your second reading, particularly with the first poem. So I think it'd be good to hand back over to you and hear your second set.
So Padraig, who drove the snakes out of Ireland. At the allotment, Daddy forked the crumbly black earth till the air quaked with anticipation of excess, me sifting stones in search of treasure. The robin sat pert on the lip of the bucket, meant to carry spuds or cabbages or the occasional giggle tickle carrot back to placate the mammy. The bird's eye bright with a lust for worms, his song a crystal cataract of merry, though none of the seeds we sowed ever showed head out of the sly earth, and we saw nothing of the slow worm Daddy promised, so that his name being Padraig too, I guessed he must be a saint, especially when he himself vanished. Though he turned up months later at the end of school again and again and again, till I had to tell the mammy where the books and toys came from, which got me sent away to board at St. Bridget's Convent, where the head nun was nice to you if your mammy gave her fruit cake in a tin, bottles of orange linctus sherry, a crochet shawl like frothy cobwebs, none of which my mammy could afford, Padraig having banished more than snakes. So again, this was kind of inspired by my mother indirectly, because she lived in Kells. She was born in Kells, wild lass of Kells. She shuffles on the curb outside O'Shaughnessy's, corner of Kelly and Dunleven Road. Her eyes the colour of Our Lady's veil, scorched bluer by her copper curls, on the lookout for the da. Her task of a Friday night to wheedle the wages off of him before he sets out on the lash, glad of a break from the chores. Socks like a flock of crows for ever jostling, hand-me-down frocks in need of hems, pants snagged on barbed wire, nails atop of farmers' walls and fences. Herself, the first-born of a baker's dozen, endless mopping up of spats, snail snots, scabby porridge pots. Licks of laughter, yellow light, sidle out the gaping door into the night, let out by culchies on their shuffle to the bar. Egypts with purple slurs for eyes, Glances tossed her way, collection plate clink of small change at Sunday Mass. The odd time a flash of lust, the most times shame. A rare smile to build her up. Sure, aren't you a dote now, Delia? Looking out for your mammy. God bless yourself. Eyes cast down, pious daughter of the Virgin, Lord love the child, in her wilting dress, miraculous blue medal clipped to the chest of her tatty cardigan. An occasion of sin, to be sure, Slovenes might take advantage of, till she glances up. That glare, brazen as hell's fires, from the child of Mary of the scry eye, seventh daughter of a seventh son, flame hex of a wild blood tinker. Skipping off home to a last scald of the pot, wedge of soda fall thick with dripping. Her pocket is a clatter of coins, only the lighter by a bleary-eyed pint. Next one was inspired by a visit to the fair when I was 9. We went back to visit my mother's family. Navan Fair. The cage dangles upside down on the tip of a tentacle, flung like a baby's arm to its steepest sprawl. It idles in the breeze, quivers, my knuckles white, tight with clutching the metal bar. A singe of sugar rises from the candy floss stand and axle grease, Woolworth's cheap scent, shouts, laughter, all the hurdy-gurdy grizzle of the fair. I breathe like sipping water in a drought, barely enough to keep me conscious, lest falling into a belly-bloating whale I loose my grip. How might it be to slip, soar, a swift inscribing secrets, or the blood clot that might have been you slipping out from between my legs to slump, limbs akimbo, a crooked star glinting in the churned up mud, essence seeping through jellyfish skin. My fingers tire, begin to fail, open, but the engine judders, grunts back to life. Cogs, once smooth, stutter me back to the start. I clamber out, stagger through quicksand crowds, my face a clown's mask. And though my lips curve upwards as if all this has been nothing more than a lark, my heart weeps clotted tears. The next two we move on to my mother. Afterwards. After they took away the body, the nice young men in green uniforms, their eyes shiny, like everyone's that day, their voices the soothe of pigeons on the roof. Best not watch, love, steep stairs, know what I mean? Better off in the garden. You shred a forget-me-not, recall the hike up Ben Bulben Mount, her eyes squinting as she told you about her and Daddy. After, once the ambulance has left, at the Crown and Shamrock, you weep into a glass of Merlot large, fidget the pearl rosary you loosened from her fist. The waitress, from County Clare, her eyes the same queer blue of Mammy's that, according to the fancy of the moon, flashed crazy like a Kildare mare, nodding as you hiccup how you'd dropped by for tea with a batch of scones to find herself a bed. Asleep you'd thought till you saw her fingertips, a ruin of fallen plums. The napkin sops, a Glencar gush of tears, your heart of ice you took for hatred, melting, loosed like one of Grandad's racers, only this was a race already run. On reaching heaven, Your eyes, the bubble sparkle of a moish lancha. You'll float across in that cherry cardigan you favoured towards the end. Stuck at home, you toasted the hours with a click of needles, knitting socks for friends. I dropped by or phoned less often than I later wished, though that last time I brought the cake, a treat we'd baked together years before, your strong hand on mine steering the heartbeat symmetry of the wooden spoon through an anarchy of icing sugar, butter, splash, or more dependent on the mood of Bewley's coffee. The spill of your song fizzing the shadows of the basement kitchen as I jammed together sponges open-hearted as your love. The glory of walnut halves tallied 1 to 10 onto my palm to be set with caution on the buttercream glaze. Baked in honour of the day, the sun with its celebratory gleam unseasonable. 10th of the 10th, the date you and I each entered this world, and that you, even with your sixth sense, never guessed would be the day you'd leave. And the final poem, Forest Eulogy. I choose a druid oak to oversee your journey. Rest my back into its gravelled spine, sense its heartbeat syncopate with mine. A winter past we savoured wine, sparkled to rubies by adder tongue flickers in the grate. Crackling bark, guzzling, the relics bone chips of log and ash silky as the apple blossom talc you loved. Next day you watched me fork the log's dregs beneath your favourite David Austin. Your last choice, patience. You rest now beside the grate in a copper urn. Dawn sweeps away the night as I gather ash and chips in a shovel arthritic with rust. Cradle your pot, pad a Gretel trail of golden dapple to your guardian tree. Sprinkle ash about its knuckly roots. Lift my head to the echo in a blackbird's eulogy of your song.
Thank you so much.
You're
It
welcome.
was fantastic to hear your accent coming out, especially in that first poem. It was really nice to hear.
Oh.
Um, Something that I wondered, I mean, that penultimate poem on reaching heaven has this fantastic shape. Um, and why did you decide to write this poem with this wonderful outline?
Well, the shape of it is like a woman's pregnant belly, and it somehow, it just kind of it, it just pulled me to do that. And I like
Mm,
experimenting with shape. Um, so I guess I'm very visual as well. I've been a painter at different times, and I've been a musician. So the sound is important to me, and the visual as well as the meaning.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. Um, well, one last question that I have for you before we head over to Zoe is I wondered if you have any poetry recommendations of your own for anyone who's watching at home.
Yes, I mean, what I'm reading at present, or I'm waiting to receive Naomi Foyle's most recent collection, Importance. I love her work. She was one of my kind of inspirations as I set out, on the BA. And also Moira Donaldson, Bone House. I've got and read and reread every of one of her books, her pamphlets and collections, and I love the way she puts ideas and words together. Um,
Mm.
and another poet I discovered recently is Martina Mcgowan. She's an American African poet, and her latest book is I Am the Rage, and it is so full of energy, and it's
Mm.
fantastic. I really
Brilliant.
recommend
Well,
investigating.
absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on Meet the Poet. You've been a fantastic guest, Pratibha. So thank you. I'm so glad that Pratibha could join us on Meet the Poet today. And to everyone who tuned in at home, I hope you had as much fun as I did hearing about Pratibha's life and how richly her poetry adventures through it all. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can sign up to our mailing list to be notified about all future poetry events like these. Also, do catch up on our enormous back catalogue of Meet the Poets, which you can find on our Facebook and YouTube channels. There's guests such as Genevieve Carver, Ramona Herdman, Phil Vernon, so many others for you to catch up on. And there's one last thing. We have our upcoming folk music and poetry and the environment series, where we're encouraging you to send in your poems addressing the climate crisis to be aired on our weekly show. There's more information in the description. Do check it out. But that's all for now. I hope to see you at the next Meet the Poet on the 10th of November at 8 p.m, where we'll be joined by Zoe Siobhan Howarth Lowe, and we'll be discussing her influences of motherhood and family, and we'll also see poetry confronting some of the darker parts of life. It's a really interesting one, and I hope to see you there.